Story follows Anne, a beautiful young woman who finds herself waking up in a hospital after a mysterious accident with no recollection of who she is. The doctor informs her that she has amnesia, but things only get more confusing for Anne when she asks if the police can identify her by her fingerprints. Her fingertips were badly injured, and she was found in an abandoned area with no identifying information on her clothing. If no one comes to claim her, she will have to be sent to a government shelter and start a new life. Anne is horrified at this prospect. She has no memories, no identity, and apparently no one searching for her. Looking in the mirror, however, she is at least consoled by her appearance. She's beautiful. She happily chats with her reflection, hoping that something she says will spark her memory, but her mind remains as empty as it was before. After days of resting in the hospital, Anne comes up with an outlandish idea. If hitting her head caused her to lose her memory, perhaps hitting her head again will restore it. Anne charges headfirst into a wall in an effort to knock herself out, but when she awakens, the old woman beside her has exciting news. A young man came to the hospital searching for Anne while she was out cold, and he claims to be her boyfriend. Even better, the women in the room assure Anne that the young man is exceedingly handsome. Anne immediately takes an interest in this mysterious man. Not only does he apparently have a romantic connection to her, but he may also be the key to unlocking her lost memories. Eventually, a man named Tay comes to the hospital with the doctor. Tay is a boxer, but the moment Anne lays eyes on him, her excitement is dashed. He's not the movie star she was hoping for. Tay tells Anne that she's 33 years old, that she works at his grandmother's tofu shop, and that the two of them have been dating for 2 years. He also reveals that they're planning to get married. Anne is not pleased and demands that Tay prove his claims. Tay shows Anne an old photograph of the two of them together, explaining that most of their pictures were lost when he misplaced his phone while searching for her. When Anne asks Tay to contact her family, Tay delivers yet another crushing blow to Anne's memories. She apparently has none. She grew up in an orphanage. Anne is devastated. No parents, no home, and no life that she can remember. However, her suspicions about Tay are far from over. Anne asks the doctor why the hospital would simply release her to a stranger, and the doctor explains that Tay provided sufficient proof that the two of them are connected. With no better options, Anne reluctantly agrees to go with Tay to his countryside village. Tay's intention is for familiar surroundings to eventually jog Anne's memory, but instead of taking Anne to Seoul as he promised, Tay takes Anne to a quiet village that she has no recollection of. Anne still thinks about Seoul, but Tay claims that they moved to the village 2 months ago. Several women in the village immediately recognize Anne and confirm that Tay brought his girlfriend to stay with them because they're getting married. Instead of calming Anne's fears, this only frustrates her. She desperately wants to believe Tay is telling the truth about being her boyfriend, but she just as desperately does not want to believe him. At Tay's grandmother's tofu shop, things are no better for Anne. His grandmother suffers from dementia while another elderly woman is mute. Neither can provide Anne with much information. Tay then takes Anne to the house where they supposedly live together. A dog immediately begins barking at Anne as if she's some home invader. Anne is delighted to have found proof that she's not accustomed to this place, but Tay assures her that it isn't their dog. It simply wanders the village. Inside the house, Anne is no more at ease. The floral prints and odd furniture are not to her liking, and she asks Tay about how the two of them supposedly met. Tay reveals that they encountered each other in the mountains and that Anne was afraid of frogs during their meeting. Tay saved her from the frogs and she became infatuated with him, chasing after him romantically. Anne is offended by this story and tells Tay that she would never chase after someone like him. She asks him to stop before she dies of embarrassment. Later, Tay leaves for his boxing training and meets his friend and trainer, Dub. Tay admits that Anne doesn't believe any of the stories he tells her, and he has good reason to be concerned. Almost everything Tay told Anne was a lie. Anne didn't work at a tofu shop. She was a public prosecutor who went undercover to gather information about a criminal organization. She secretly recorded conversations with the gang members, but when the criminals learned of her betrayal, they attempted to bribe her. Anne refused their advances, and the gang members attacked her car, forcing her to escape the scene. Tay worked for the same criminal organization as Anne, and he had already decided to quit his job. His boss only gave him one final task before letting him go for good: kill the female prosecutor who was recording the gang's conversations. That prosecutor was Anne. Tay had no idea who the target of his hit was, so he ordered his men to capture her. When Tay saw Anne, however, he immediately recognized her and he decided to save her instead. With Dub's help, Tay transported the unconscious Anne to safety and made it seem as if she died in the car crash. Tay destroyed the car to cover up any evidence, tricking his criminal boss into believing that Anne was dead, but Tay also knew that this deception wouldn't last forever. He deliberately damaged Anne's fingerprints so that the police couldn't identify her easily. After Anne awoke from the crash with amnesia, Tay and Dub created a new plan. Tay would pretend to be Anne's boyfriend, remove her from Seoul, and keep her in the village until her memories returned and the criminal organization lost interest in her. Back at the house, Anne continues her efforts to uncover Tay's lies. She finds one major inconsistency in his stories. She isn't afraid of frogs at all, and this upsets Tay, who insists that their romance began because she was petrified of the creatures. Later, Dub asks Tay why he's risking his life to protect Anne, and Tay finally reveals that their connection began long before the accident. Tay lost an important boxing medal, and Anne returned it to him, but their most significant encounter took place 8 years ago. Tay was already working for the criminal organization at the time and had received orders to take a rest after completing one of his missions. He was walking on the streets when Anne happened to see several gangsters surrounding a young man and preparing to beat him up. Anne had no idea who Tay was, but she jumped into action anyway. She grabbed a bicycle and a toy gun and scared off the gangsters, allowing Tay to escape with her help. Unfortunately, the motorcycle had run out of fuel, so he and Anne were forced to spend the night together while they waited until morning. Anne treated Tay's hand and the two of them talked about various things. Tay learned that Anne grew up in an orphanage, but she believed her mother loved her nonetheless. Anne also mentioned that she was studying law and that she wanted to become a prosecutor. That night also happened to be Anne's birthday, so she asked for a photograph with him as a souvenir. Years later, that photograph would be used by Tay to convince the hospital that he and Anne were a couple. By morning, Tay thanked Anne for saving him. Before they parted ways, he promised that if fate allowed the two of them to meet again, he would repay her kindness. Years later, fate brought the two of them together again when Tay was forced to kill Anne, but he honored his promise to her by saving her life instead. The next morning, Tay asks Anne to have breakfast with him, but she refuses. She doesn't feel like his girlfriend and she suspects that she might have been kidnapped. Tay doesn't press the issue. He leaves some money for Anne to buy food for herself, but because leaving Anne unattended could be dangerous, Tay asks Dub's wife to look after her while he secretly returns to the criminal organization's headquarters. There, Tay turns in his equipment and announces that he's quitting the organization to go back to boxing. Meanwhile, Anne's colleagues at the prosecutor's office are growing increasingly worried about her disappearance. She has been gone for 3 weeks, and since everyone knew that Anne was investigating a dangerous criminal organization, they fear that something terrible has happened to her. In the village, Anne is also desperately trying to piece together information about her forgotten life. Dub's wife insists that they're close friends, but Anne doesn't believe her either. Eventually, Anne asks Dub's wife to take her to see a psychiatrist, hoping that professional help might be able to restore her memories while she waits for her fingerprints to heal. Dub's wife agrees to take Anne to the hospital, but her old car breaks down on the way there. Anne is left on the roadside while Dub's wife goes to fix the car. It begins to rain, so Anne buys an umbrella and walks toward the hospital. On the way, she meets a man who is also heading to the psychiatric clinic. The man asks to share Anne's umbrella, but she hesitates before reluctantly agreeing. Anne is immediately disappointed with her decision when a passing vehicle splashes water over them. The man shamelessly uses Anne as a human shield, and Anne gets drenched while the man stays dry. Furious, Anne tells the man to stop bothering her before anyone assumes that they're a couple. When Anne finally arrives at the psychiatric clinic, she is surprised to learn that the irritating stranger is actually the psychiatrist. After hearing Anne's story, however, the psychiatrist refuses to help her. Anne has no form of identification, and she doesn't know who she really is. The psychiatrist also has no one trustworthy who can confirm Anne's information. Anne argues that she might have been kidnapped, so the psychiatrist's refusal to treat her could have consequences, but the psychiatrist remains unmoved. He tells Anne that she needs reliable witnesses who can confirm her claims before he will do anything. While Anne is struggling to find help, her colleagues are still searching for her. One of the prosecutors eventually learns that an unknown woman with Anne's appearance was recently admitted to the psychiatric clinic. He goes there immediately, and the elderly patient who shared a room with Anne recognizes the woman he's looking for. She confirms that Anne was there, but she also reveals that Anne has already left with her fiancé. When the prosecutor asks the old woman about the mysterious man, she recalls one important detail. He looked like a boxer. Meanwhile, Anne is continuing her search for any information about her past. Dub's wife takes Anne to another woman who supposedly has knowledge about her lost memories, but Anne quickly realizes that this woman is a scam artist who is only after her money. Anne refuses to pay the woman and a confrontation breaks out. During the commotion, Anne accidentally knocks one of the woman's statues to the ground. The woman grabs Anne and demands that she pay for the damaged statue. Fortunately, Tay arrives just in time to cover the payment and takes Anne away. On the way back, one of Anne's shoes breaks, so Tay buys her a new pair while she waits outside. As Anne sits there, she falls asleep and has a frightening nightmare. She sees herself being tortured, including a scene where someone burns her fingertips. Anne wakes up screaming and grabs Tay's shoulder. She tells Tay that she isn't feeling safe, especially because she still hasn't been convinced that Tay is really her boyfriend. Wanting to reassure her, Tay kneels in front of Anne and gently puts the new shoes on her feet. He tells her that he liked her from the moment they met, but he regretted not getting her number that day. He hopes that they can start over again with Tay's help, and this time Anne can forget about all the horrible things that have happened to her. Anne feels especially touched by Tay's sincere confession. Tay takes her back to his house, cooks some food for her, and they share a meal together. Anne is finally able to relax around Tay, and that night she thinks about what Tay told her. Meanwhile, her colleague Joe is still searching for Anne. He has essentially turned his city upside down, and he even tracks down Dub because he knows that Tay and Dub are close friends. The following day, Tay unexpectedly takes Anne to a doctor who claims to be able to help her. She had begun to suspect that Tay did not want her memories to return, so she has mixed feelings when Tay takes her there. At the clinic, Anne learns that the psychiatrist is one of Tay's childhood classmates. After discussing her situation, the psychiatrist and Tay decide that Anne should begin attending therapy twice a week while undergoing brain scans and other tests. As Anne is leaving, she accidentally hits her little toe against the door. Tay immediately jumps to his feet and carries her as if she's broken her leg. Anne quickly stops him, informing him that it's only her toe. It hasn't been amputated. Afterward, Tay takes Anne shopping because even she can't tolerate the old-fashioned clothes that she's been wearing. Anne happily tries on a variety of outfits and accessories while Tay watches her with a smile. They buy clothes, shoes, and Anne eventually gets a phone so that she can search the internet and reconnect with the outside world. Later, they visit Tay's grandmother on Dresses Nicely and spend time with the family. Tay is delighted to see Anne growing more comfortable with him in the village, but other events are occurring elsewhere. Joe's search for Anne leads him straight into the path of the criminal organization. The gang captures Joe and beats him up. Their leader is about to kill Joe when he reveals that Anne didn't only record the gang's conversations with her watch, she had something else as well that Joe hasn't been able to find. If they kill Joe, they might never learn what that something was. The gang leader reluctantly spares Joe's life. Back in the village, Tay continues his efforts to help Anne regain her memories. He takes part in various activities in an effort to spark her recollections, telling her that she used to enjoy photography. Anne begins taking pictures of almost everything around her, and Tay notices that their relationship has become significantly more affectionate. Even the village women begin commenting on how close the two of them are. When they return home, Anne tells Tay to stop wasting the entire day entertaining her and earn some money already. While Tay is away, Anne sees an advertisement on television for a salmon restaurant. Curious, she searches for it on the internet. That's when Anne discovers something astonishing. An old photograph shows her dining at the restaurant with another woman, but the woman in that picture doesn't seem to match what Tay described. She wears expensive clothing and a beautiful ring that Anne doesn't recognize. None of those things exist in their small village house, and her suspicions about Tay are reignited. Anne rushes to Tay's boxing gym looking for answers, but she stops when she hears a woman confronting Tay. The woman angrily calls Tay a gangster and says that she doesn't want her son growing up to be like him. Anne immediately recalls the terrifying visions of her fingertips being burned and realizes that they might not have been dreams after all. They were memories, and Tay could have been responsible for those horrible things that happened to her. Anne quietly leaves the scene. On her way back, Anne encounters the psychiatrist, who notices something is wrong and takes her to his clinic. Anne tells the psychiatrist that she had begun to trust Tay because he was always kind to her, but she's frightened by his connection to criminals. Tay soon arrives, and another childhood friend of his who works at the clinic tells Anne not to judge Tay based on his past. Regardless of everything Tay has done, he's always been exceptionally kind to Anne. Later, Anne confronts Tay about another mystery. She learned that a different name was connected to her social media account. Tay explains that one name was given to her at the orphanage while Anne was her birth name. Despite being abandoned, Anne never hated her mother, and she loved the name Tay kept calling her. Tay remains uncertain, so Anne secretly goes back to her room and sends a message to the woman in the restaurant photograph. The next day, Tay gives Anne a USB stick full of songs and asks her to bring it to his grandmother's birthday celebration. The party begins without a hitch, but Anne grows increasingly annoyed by the grandmother's refusal to eat cucumber. Anne tries to force the grandmother to eat it, but a sudden memory begins to resurface in her mind. She remembers being at an orphanage where the adults forced her to eat food that she didn't like. Overcome with emotion, Anne accidentally yells out loud, frightening everyone at the party. Some of the villagers criticize Anne for ruining the celebration, so Anne announces that she's had enough of them all. She packs her belongings and leaves for a hotel. At the same time, one of Tay's former gang members arrives and begins asking questions about Anne. Tay warns him to move away from the peaceful life he's built, but Tay receives disappointing news that Anne has disappeared. He immediately abandons everything and begins searching for her, terrified that his former boss may have discovered that she was still alive. However, Anne is not with the gang. She's waiting for the woman from the restaurant photograph to arrive. When they finally meet, Anne asks her about her childhood, her real identity, and her relationship with Tay. To Anne's surprise, everything the woman says confirms Tay's stories. She learned that Anne grew up in an orphanage and that her boyfriend was a boxer. Even the beautiful clothes in the restaurant photograph supposedly belong to Tay. The woman then reveals their friendship. They met while working together at a cafe and became close friends, but jealousy eventually drove them apart. The woman continuously harassed Anne before Anne cut off their friendship. Anne leaves the woman's house feeling crushed. She's beginning to think that Tay didn't lie to her, but she also hates him for what he did to her at his grandmother's birthday. Too embarrassed to return home, she wanders the streets alone. Tay eventually finds the phone he bought her and finds her sitting outside crying. Instead of yelling at her, he comforts her and takes her home. Several village women are waiting to berate Anne, but Tay's grandmother unexpectedly sides with Anne and tells the women to stop picking on her for one mistake. When Anne enters to apologize, the grandmother tells her something surprisingly wise. All of us embarrass ourselves at some point in life. Sometimes these moments can be helpful because they teach us to be more careful about what we say and do. Anne then bursts into tears later. Dub tells Tay's unhappy past. Tay was once an international boxing champion with a bright future ahead of him. His grandmother isn't actually his biological grandmother. Years earlier, Tay's mother brought her young son to the village, and the elderly woman took them in. After Tay's mother passed away, the grandmother raised Tay as her own grandson and treated him like family. When she became sick, Tay used all the money he earned from boxing to pay for her treatment. Once he could no longer afford to, he was forced to join the criminal organization. Once he was with the gang, Tay began to hurt people even more violently and recklessly, as if by doing so he could forget all the misery and disappointment of his childhood. Dub reveals that behind Tay's intimidating mask is a man with a heart full of pain and turmoil. He tells Anne not to encourage Tay to continue down this path and make his wound even deeper. A few days later, Anne learns that Tay has been beaten severely. When she finds Tay, he is covered with bruises and she is shocked that he did not fight back when he was attacked. Tay reveals that he could not defend himself because he made a promise that he would never use his boxing skills outside the ring. Her heart aches at this, and she realizes that Tay has been injured because of the promise he made to her. The man is standing in front of her, bleeding and broken, and she cannot even protect him. Although she cannot remember ever promising to do so, she is suddenly overcome with anger and tells Tay that it was probably because of this promise that she fell in love with him in the first place. She is so caught up in the moment that she continues speaking. Perhaps they should return to where they were. Maybe they should sleep in the same room again, pick a date for their wedding, get married, buy some land and start building their future. Unfortunately, Tay quickly dispels her fantasy, explaining that it is impossible for him to change his plans. A friend of his with an injured leg is traveling from another district and will be staying at Tay's place overnight. Tay will have to share his room with him so that he can look after him. Anne is nearly killed by embarrassment. It seems that she made Tay a proposal of marriage and then told him to plan his future with her, but he informs her that another man will be sleeping in his bed instead. The friend who arrives is actually Tay's assistant from the criminal organization. The next morning, Anne wakes up to find a large breakfast prepared for her and happily eats everything. Tay then takes her to the psychiatrist's office again. The doctor immediately notices the change in their relationship. Tay and Anne arrive together, banter with each other playfully and act like a proper couple. This time Anne undergoes an important examination that will help recover some of her long-lost memories. Later, Dub, his wife Tay, Anne, and Tay's assistant from the gang gather for lunch. While at the lunch table, Tay notices something suspicious. His assistant is using a different phone than the one he used the day before. Tay does not confront him but pays close attention to the situation. He later buys walnuts on the way home from work after reading that they are good for the brain. Perhaps they will help Anne recover some of her long-lost memories. He runs into an old friend of his at the store who has recently quit her job after recovering from her first romance. The girl is immediately very affectionate towards Tay and acts quite flirtatious. However, Anne arrives, and she becomes jealous of this sudden show of interest that Tay has shown the woman. Unbeknownst to the girl, her words betray her possessive nature. She begins instructing Tay on what he should be doing. Why is he standing so close to the woman? Move backward, put his hands by his sides, take another step back. Tay obediently follows all of her instructions. The girl eventually asks Tay to find a way for her to go home. She gets in the vehicle. At the same time, Anne gets on berating him for nearly pulling all the girl's hair out, but somehow she managed to restrain herself. She then tells Tay to stop talking so much and take her home. Tay apologizes for upsetting Anne and promises not to speak so intimately with other women. Anne is absolutely delighted. She does not yet have all the evidence she needs to confirm that Tay and she were once a couple, but she is already behaving like his jealous girlfriend. Soon afterwards, one of Anne's childhood memories returns. She remembers that when she was in the orphanage, all the children were punished for the mistakes of just one. Sometimes they were forced to stand barefoot in the icy cold. She recalls that the staff often stole from the children and beat some of the older ones. Young Anne witnessed all of this, but there was nothing she could do about it. This memory helps explain her hatred of violence because she grew up around it. Later, Anne asks Tay what his greatest weakness is. Surprisingly, it is rain. The day his grandmother became seriously ill, the day he quit boxing, and some of his most devastating personal setbacks all happened on rainy days. Tay explains that there was nothing he could do about it when those incidents occurred because he had no one to protect him from the rain. The next day, everyone gathers at Dub's place once again. Tay's assistant from the gang is disappearing at times during the conversations and Tay is becoming suspicious. Eventually, Tay corners him and demands to know whether his former boss sent him. He denies it and he gives a good explanation about the phones. He does not have two cell phones, he has a part-time job analyzing football matches and he shows Tay the sports program he uses. Tay is convinced by his story and at the same time the assistant reminds Tay that by keeping their location a secret, it also benefits him. If their boss finds out where they are, Tay and his friends will not be safe either. Meanwhile, Anne somehow finds herself caught up in a ridiculous ritual that involves walking over blades to prove that she has supernatural powers. She is petrified because she knows she does not have any supernatural powers, and she believes she will ruin her feet walking over the blades. Fortunately, the ritual is interrupted when something is thrown into the circle, causing it to be cancelled instantly. Grateful to the woman who threw the item into the circle, and she thanks her sincerely for saving her from losing both her feet and her dignity. Everyone celebrates and Tay eventually arrives to take Anne home. He spends the night beside her and watches over her while she sleeps. He is delighted that she has fallen asleep in his arms, but the joy is short-lived. Tay is accustomed to spending nights with Anne, but he has been deceiving her, and this lie is beginning to take its toll. Once again, he is horrified by the thought that Anne's memories may return at any time, and he is even more terrified by the idea that she will eventually leave him. Unfortunately, Tay's fears are becoming a reality. When Anne wakes up, another memory returns and she begins thinking about Joe. Since her memories are fragmented, she does not realize that Joe is her colleague. She is surprised to remember him at all, but in her delusion she thinks he is her boyfriend, and suddenly remembers a date she wrote on the wall in one of her returning memories. When she looks at it carefully, she is surprised to see that the date is recent. If she has only been dating Tay for 2 years, why does this memory make it seem like something happened just before her accident? Suspicious, Anne immediately visits her psychiatrist and tells him everything that happened. She also remembers hearing that Joe studied at a university in Hong Kong, and since the psychiatrist also studied there, he agrees to look into it. The psychiatrist contacts an old colleague and is surprised to learn that Joe is real. They manage to contact him, and when he hears Anne's voice, he is overwhelmed with emotion. "Anne, where have you been?" She promises to tell him everything and she agrees to meet him in Seoul that night. Meanwhile, the doctor tells Tay that they want to repeat the neurological procedure that helped trigger some of Anne's memories. This time they will use a more advanced machine at a Seoul clinic. Tay is eager to accompany her when he is stopped again. His grandmother has suddenly become seriously ill, and Tay rushes to the hospital. He learns that she has a tumor and that there is no other choice but to keep her there. Unfortunately, Tay is forced to stay with his grandmother instead of going with Anne to Seoul. Before she leaves, Tay gives her a bag with all the things she might need. Inside the bag, Anne finds warm socks. Tay has put them there after remembering the memory of childhood that involves standing barefoot in the cold. She also finds a music player because Tay overheard her talking about how she wished she had something to listen to during long trips. The thoughtful gesture touches her deeply. Then it begins to rain, and Anne remembers what Tay told her about having rain because some of the worst days of his life occurred on rainy days. The worst incidents happen when he had no one to protect him from the rain. Without thinking twice, Anne turns around and goes back to Tay instead of continuing on her journey to Seoul. She does not want to leave him alone in the rain again. Tay is surprised to see her, but she is determined to share his umbrella with him. Neither one of them realizes that Anne has just escaped a potentially deadly situation. The gang leader captured Joe and threatened his life, telling him to persuade Anne to go to Seoul. The boss is furious with Tay for betraying him. Tay has served him faithfully for 14 years without ever being caught doing something wrong. He is one of his most trusted men, and Tay has betrayed him because of one girl. Back in the village, Tay focuses on his grandmother. Knowing that her condition is worsening, she tells him that she does not want to waste all his resources trying to make her life longer. She does not want to waste her remaining time traveling from one hospital to another. She wants to spend her final days with the people she loves most and make new happy memories with them. Tay reluctantly agrees and he takes her home. Later, Anne hears part of a conversation about marriage. Naturally, she misunderstands what she hears and she becomes convinced that Tay is planning to propose to her. By the next morning, she is casually mentioning the types of flowers she likes and telling Tay what bouquet she wants for her wedding. Tay has no idea what is going on, but unfortunately the truth is much more disappointing. While speaking in private with his assistant, Tay reveals that he intends to send Anne away to a distant place when her memories return so that the gang cannot find her. Several village women hear him, and since they have grown fond of Anne, they decide to intervene. They do not want Tay to take her away, but they have no idea how to convince him. Eventually, they tell Anne what they overheard, but she refuses to believe them. Tay loves her and she is positive about it, but when she goes home, Tay begins to avoid talking about their future altogether. Finally, Anne asks him directly about marriage. Tay tells her that she needs to recover her memories before they can discuss anything else. Anne's heart breaks at his words and she begins to wonder if Tay has only been pretending to care about her all along. Disappointed in him, she goes out on her own and starts drinking. Her psychiatrist happens to call and learn of her location and he goes to where she is. Seeing how sad she is, he asks her whether she really wants to marry Tay before she regains her memories. Anne admits that she loves Tay, but his rejection of her is killing her. She cries until she feels weak and the doctor takes her home. When they arrive, he confronts Tay. Is he really Anne's boyfriend? She is so vulnerable right now and anyone could take advantage of her. Taze darkens at the doctor's words, and he warns him not to say such things again or he will have his face rearranged. Tay then goes inside. Later, Anne decides to test Tay's sincerity by pretending that all her memories have returned. Tay is delighted and he immediately tells Dub. Dub is also relieved, but recovering her memories means that Anne is once again in danger. Dub tells Tay that the best thing to do is to take Anne escape to Japan. They can start a new life there and they will leave everything behind. However, Tay refuses because his grandmother is seriously ill and he cannot simply abandon the woman who raised him to save his own life. Dub tells him that perhaps once in his life he should be selfish for a change. Tay still cannot do it. He wanders the streets alone, crying because of all the memories of Anne that are hurting him. Meanwhile, the doctor secretly contacts Joe and meets him to discuss Anne's case. The next morning, Tay returns home thinking that Anne's memories have returned, and he finally tells her some of the things he has been keeping from her. Staying in this village is no longer safe for her, and he tells her that she must leave the country the following week. Anne is devastated to hear this, but unfortunately, Tay has no choice. She is surprised to learn that all of this has been an act, and Tay forces himself to be cruel. Fortunately, yes, Anne breaks down in tears. In frustration, she pushes against a picture frame, cuts her hand, and runs away from Tay's house crying, leaving her phone behind. Everyone begins searching for her, but she has gone to a government facility and told them that she has no identification and that her fingerprints do not work. Eventually, Tay and the others find her with the help of street surveillance cameras. When the government's vehicle arrives to take Anne with them, Tay physically stops the vehicle. The village women join him and they all plead with Anne to return home with them. They realize that she was only pretending to have lost her memories so that Tay could send her away. When they finally understand everything, Anne is happy to return home with Tay. Tay then surprises her by telling her that he has covered the whole place with pink flowers. She wears a beautiful dress and Tay wears a suit and they create their own little romantic celebration. This time, however, there are no gangs, lies, or misunderstandings. The two of them are just enjoying each other's company. Tay tells Anne some of their real memories together and she finally tells him how much she loves him. She even reveals that the password to one of her social media accounts is tied to his name. Night, Anne falls asleep peacefully beside him. Unfortunately, this does not last for long because the psychiatrist unexpectedly pays Tay a visit that same night. He tells him that he secretly met Joe and Joe told him that Anne is not an amnesiac as they thought. She is actually the public prosecutor. Tay is nearly devastated, but the psychiatrist reassures him that he did not reveal her location to anyone. He suspected that Joe was lying to him and told Tay that Joe might have confused Anne with some other woman with similar appearance, and Tay is relieved. For once, the psychiatrist's interference proves to be rewarding because now he wants Tay to tell him more about Anne's past so he could use the details during their treatment and help her regain her memories. Meanwhile, Anne and Tay have become very close. She spends most of her time at his boxing gym joking with him and hitting the bags. However, when one of Tay's boxers has to compete in an official match, Anne accompanies the young men to the event. During the fight, Tay's boxer loses because of the ring's bad condition, but the organizers want to cover up the incident and write off the loss. Anne refuses to believe in their fabricated story and claims that the loss was not because of the strong opponent, but because of the ring's poor maintenance. The organizers start arguing with her, claiming that she is simply mad. However, Anne remembers that she is a prosecutor and immediately threatens them with a lawsuit for not maintaining the boxing ring. She manages to force the organizers to restart the match, which Tay boxer subsequently wins. Everyone cheers for him, but when Anne returns home later that day, she finds something dangerous that could jeopardize her entire life. She spots a familiar watch on the floor and realizes that it is the one she used to record incriminating evidence against the criminal organization. In addition, the gang leader is standing right behind her. She said that I was wondering who owns this watch. Does it belong to you, sir? The gangster secretly followed Anne after seeing her at the boxing match with Tay. He overheard the conversation between her and Tay about Anne's memory loss and decided to pay her a visit to see if his suspicions are correct. Although Anne does not recognize him, something inside her seems to warn her of his presence. Her body remembers the danger and she immediately hands over the watch and leaves, saying that she thinks it belongs to the gang leader. Later that day, she tells Tay's grandmother about the strange man she saw, and that night Tay returns home carrying dinner. Before entering, someone calls his name and Tay realizes that it is the gang leader. The second he sees him, he starts begging. Anne has lost her memory and does not remember anything about the investigation. She does not even suspect that she used to be a prosecutor. Most importantly, Tay loves her and the boss is furious. For 14 years, Tay has been serving him faithfully and 14 years of loyalty are gone because of one woman. The gang leader takes Tae to the isolated place where several of his men are tied up and kills them in front of him, one by one, as a lesson. However, he does not kill Tae. He has something else in store for him. He said to Tae, "I will leave you alive," constantly waiting for the day when someone tells you that Anne has been killed. Tae will learn to live with this knowledge, and the boss will kill him as well after making him undergo this torment. After the gangster leaves, Tae immediately goes to the psychiatrist for help. He receives a tracking and communication device so that someone could locate him and hear what he says if the gangsters follow him again. Tae later meets Dub and his wife, who help him come up with a brilliant plan to get Anne out of the country unnoticed by the gangsters on Thursday. The most difficult part of the plan is to convince Anne to leave, so Tae decides to break her heart. He tells her that he has decided to return to the gang, but she begs him not to do it. Tae claims that he has to do it so that he could afford Tae's grandmother's surgery and leaves. Anne is devastated and even asks Dub to convince Tae to change his mind, but Dub knows Tae better and does not tell her anything. Tae later teaches Anne self-defense techniques so that she knows how to protect herself if he is not with her and she is attacked by the gangsters. Anne visits her friend in the village, and everyone gives her little gifts to remind her of them. For her, it is emotional because she does not suspect that she will soon leave them forever. She does not realize that they are saying their goodbye to her. The following day, Tae takes Anne toward the coast. He plans to secretly put her on a boat to Japan, but several vehicles are waiting for them when they arrive. The gangsters have followed them and armed men surround Tae. He gets out of the car and fearlessly engages them in a fight while his assistant takes Anne and escapes on a motorcycle. However, soon the assistant reveals to Tae that he has not come to rescue Anne. Tae is not abandoning her, but sacrificing himself to save her. Anne has to get on the boat to Japan and escape immediately. She gets on the vessel, but several criminals also try to get on board and one of them attempts to kill her. Fortunately, another passenger helps her and kills the criminal. At the harbor, Tae continues his desperate fight against the gangsters. He's wounded and covered in blood, but he does not give up and keeps fighting. Finally, Tae sees the boat disappearing on the horizon and assumes that Anne is safe. He leans against it and relaxes for a moment, but one of the gangsters laughs at him. "You are pathetic. Who told you the boat Anne is taking is not owned by our organization?" Tae looks at the gangster and smiles. "Who told you Anne is even on that boat?" A few seconds later, the harbor is swallowed by flames and Anne sees the fire from the boat. Something inside her suddenly changes and she realizes that she is not dreaming. The prosecutor office, the investigation, the gang, the torture, her cut fingers, Joe and Tae, the memories rush back to her and she finally remembers who she is. We later learn what really happened at the harbor because Dub secretly came to rescue Tae, and his long and eventful history with the gang leader begins. Many years ago, Dub used to be the boxing coach of the future gang leader. However, during an important match, his fighter seemed to be winning, but shortly afterwards, Dub took the towel and signaled that his boxer had lost. Everyone accused him of betraying the gang leader, but in reality, Dub knew that the boxer cheated by putting heavy objects in his gloves so that he would hit harder. He respected boxing and its traditions and could not continue working for the gang leader. He promised Tae that if he trains honestly and respects boxing, he would become a great fighter. The future gang leader never forgave Dub for this betrayal and eventually went into the criminal business. Being a dishonest boxer was no longer acceptable to him, but cheating, violence, and brutality became his new way of life. He eventually decided to kill Dub for his disobedience. Back in the present, Dub takes care of the wounded Tae and calls for an ambulance. Meanwhile, Anne escapes and returns to Seoul with all her memories intact. The first stop she makes is the house of her female friend, the woman she met when she had amnesia. The two women see each other, but immediately after, arguments and blames start. They both accuse each other of causing Anne distress and eventually agree that they were wrong. Once everything has been forgiven and forgotten, her friend asks the question that has been bothering Anne for a long time: where has Anne been all these times? Anne tells her everything and her friend is surprised to learn that an old friend saved her life, protected her, helped her remember and was willing to sacrifice himself for her sake. That man was Tae, but Anne reveals something very interesting to her friend. The criminal organization may have her recording watch, but it is not the only piece of evidence against the gang leader. Coach Dub secretly recorded him as well, and the incriminating proof is not on the watch. However, Dub will not tell Tae that Anne never actually left the country so that Tae would not attempt to rescue her again. At the same time, he begs the gangster to leave Tae alone because Tae has very little happiness in his life. After leaving the hospital, Tae is torn between his dying grandmother and the woman he loves. At the same time, Anne has returned home, hired security guards, but she cannot forget Tae. She goes back to the village. When Tae sees her, he is overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, but Anne pretends that her memories have not returned and tells him that she is only collecting her things before leaving him forever. Tae tells her that he already sent everything to Japan, but the sight of his wounded body is enough to convince Anne that she cannot just walk away from him. She helps him wash and dry his hair and bandage the wounds. She tells him that she always felt safe and protected when she was with him, as if she was surrounded by 100 mountains. When Tay falls asleep, she watches over him and decides to take care of him as well. The next day she pretends to be going to Seoul to the government shelter, but another tragedy is waiting for her. The gangster kidnaps Dub and provokes an accident involving Dub's wife so that Dub would watch her dying on the road. Tay is furious and he confronts the gang leader at his hideout, but their violent fight ends with Tay nearly being killed. Fortunately, the police arrive at the scene and arrest the gangster. Luckily, Dub's wife wakes up after the accident and later forgives Tay. He reconciles with Dub as well, but the gangster later tells Tay that he is like a thorn in his flesh and that he will remove him as soon as possible. Tay is slapped for almost getting himself killed. With the gang leader arrested and his criminal activities exposed, Anne eventually returns to her job as a prosecutor. She manages to confront the criminal and bring him to justice. The two of them finally have a chance to enjoy their relationship free from danger and deceit, but Anne soon discovers another happy surprise. Tay's ridiculous story about frogs was actually partially true because she was not afraid of them. Tay was afraid, but she never let him know about it. During their romantic and relaxed day at the beach, Tay finally confesses that Anne was his first love. He has loved her ever since she returned his boxing medal, and she was the only woman in his life. She remained the one and only, and Tay had decided to betray the criminal world in order to save her. Later, Anne takes Tay to the beach and waits for midnight to come so that she could wish him a happy birthday. She tells him that she loves him and thanks him for coming into her life, but the night is not over yet. They spend the rest of the night taking photos and making videos for him. Back in the village, everyone prepares for Tay's surprise birthday party. Tay's grandmother reveals that despite her dementia, Tay's birthday is the only day she remembers. Many years ago, Tay's mother brought him to the village and the grandmother gave them a place to live. She took care of Tay after Tay's mother died and raised him as her own grandson. Eventually, Anne has to return to Seoul for work, but the two of them are inseparable and spend their nights talking to each other through video chats. Tay is happier than ever. Unfortunately, their happiness is short-lived because investigators find several incriminating documents that implicate the gang leader, but he manages to escape while he is being transferred to the prison. The first person he sees is Tay, and the gangster pays him a personal visit. Tay is at his mother's grave when Dub warns him about the escape. They hurry to the village to protect Tay's grandmother, but they find gangsters waiting for them. Tay and Dub fight them, but the gang leader has already entered the house. He looks at the picture of Tay's mother holding him as a baby, and something inside him suddenly changes. He looks at Tay and realizes that some part of him recognizes the young man. Tay's appearance, his mannerisms, his fighting style. Tay is his son. Years ago, Tay's mother used to be in a relationship with the gang leader, but she left him because she discovered that he cheated by using boxing gloves filled with heavy objects. She realized that boxing was supposed to be an honorable sport and was disgusted by his behavior. She left Tay's father without telling him she was pregnant, but after giving birth to Tay, she returned to him and asked for money. The future gang leader gave her some cash and told her to leave again, but Tay's mother told him that she did not come for his money. She only came to tell him that she hoped Tay would become an honest boxer like his father. If that was impossible, she would raise him herself. The gang leader never saw Tay again, but he realized that Tay looked like his father. However, he was already too late to change his mind. Presently, father and son continue their fight and Tay's grandmother watches silently. Nothing can change the fact that they are enemies. Nevertheless, Tay's grandmother is the one who takes care of Tay when no one else can, and she finally takes pity on the young man. After Tay is wounded during their last fight, she takes him to the house and offers him something that only belongs to children, Tay's childhood boxing gloves. Tay is deeply touched when he sees them, and his grandmother tells him that he has suffered enough and that she wants him to forget everything painful and live happily. He obeys her and visits Tay's mother's grave for the last time to say goodbye. He buys flowers and presents for the woman who saved him and Tay's mother, but this time there are no more lies, no more fake relationship, and no more amnesia. Tay asks Anne to marry him and she agrees. Soon afterwards, the entire village turns up at the wedding organized by Anne's and Tay's friends from Seoul. Everyone is participating in the festivities and having fun because this day is special. The villagers host ridiculous banquets and celebrations. Two people who spent so much time running away from criminals and danger finally stand face to face and nothing separates them. Something else strange but wonderful happens. It starts raining, but for Tay, he realizes that rain is the saddest thing in this world. His grandmother's illness, his boxing career, loneliness, and violence are all associated with rain. Every time it started to pour, Tay felt that no one was with him to protect him from it. However, this time is different because Anne is with him and he is smiling. She's also smiling, and their friends and relatives start playing around them. The wedding is held under the rain, and the man who used to hate it has created wonderful memories under it. The woman who used to wake up without a name, a past or any memories, has finally found her place, and Tay has saved her from herself. He has escaped from the life that almost killed him, and after overcoming numerous obstacles, the fake couple who was never supposed to love each other has finally become husband and wife. This time Tay does not need to remember the past, but instead he is making plans for the future, and he is doing it with Anne. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to my channel. I appreciate your love and support. I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice day.